Hello, and welcome to the Election Assistance Commission's training on the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act for election officials. Thank you for taking the time to complete this training. Let's get started. The Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act, or UOCAVA, safeguards the rights of uniformed service members, their families, and overseas citizens to register to vote, request, and cast absentee ballots in federal elections. Since its passage in 1986, Congress has amended UOCAVA several times, most recently with the Military and Overseas Voter Empowerment, or MOVE Act, in 2010. All states must allow uniformed services and overseas voters to use the registration and absentee ballot procedures outlined in UOCAVA in elections for federal office, meaning primary, special, general, and runoff elections. Additionally, states may extend UOCAVA requirements to state and local elections. In this training, you will learn about who UOCAVA voters are, rules for UOCAVA registration and absentee applications, and required procedures for UOCAVA voting. UOCAVA applies to absent uniformed services voters and citizens living overseas. Select each button to learn more. Uniformed services voters include members of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force, Coast Guard, the Commissioned Corps of the Public Health Service, and the Commissioned Corps of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who, by reason of active duty, are absent from the place of residence where the member is otherwise qualified to vote. Members of the Merchant Marine, who, by reason of service in the Merchant Marine, are absent from the place of residence where the member is otherwise qualified to vote. A spouse or dependent of a uniformed services member, who, by reason of the active duty or service of the member, is absent from the place of residence where the spouse or dependent is otherwise qualified to vote. Note that to be covered by UOCAVA, the uniformed services voter must be absent from where they vote, but not necessarily overseas. Additionally, the Federal Voting Assistance Program, or FVAP, provides the example of a National Guard member on federal orders who is stationed within the U.S. but outside their voting jurisdiction. That National Guard member is still a UOCAVA voter. Importantly, states vary as to whether they apply UOCAVA protections to National Guard members stationed outside their voting jurisdiction under state orders. FVAP's Voting Assistance Guide provides more information on your state's policy. An overseas citizen is a person who resides outside the United States and, but for such residence, would be qualified to vote in the last place they were domiciled before leaving the United States. Each state has its own eligibility and residency requirements. Most, but not all states and the District of Columbia permit U.S. citizens who have never resided in the U.S. to register and vote where a U.S. parent would be eligible to vote. The Federal Voting Assistance Program, or FVAP, maintains information on states that allow these citizens to vote. Now it is time to check your understanding. Read the question and answer choices and select your answer. Then select Submit. Election administrators must accept any valid voter registration or absentee ballot application from a UOCAVA voter if received by not less than 30 days prior to the federal election. Select each button to learn more. Now it is time to check your understanding. Read the question and answer choices and select your answer. Then select Submit. States must have procedures for UOCAVA voters to request and submit voter registration applications and absentee ballot applications by mail and electronically for federal elections. This also includes procedures for election administrators to send the requested form or ballot by mail or electronically, whichever the voter chooses. Instructional materials provided to the UOCAVA voter must include how to request and submit forms electronically. If the UOCAVA voter does not indicate how they would like to receive materials, election officials should follow applicable state law, or if state law does not specify, then send by mail. States must have procedures to send blank ballots by mail and electronically by 45 days before an election for UOCAVA ballot applications received by that point. Election administrators must send ballots in accordance with state law and in a manner that expedites transmission for UOCAVA ballot applications received within 45 days of the election. The 45-day rule is a baseline. Some jurisdictions may send UOCAVA ballots even earlier. States may request a hardship waiver if they cannot meet the 45-day requirement. Select the button for examples. Now it is time to check your understanding. Read the question and answer choices and select your answer. Then select Submit. States must permit use of the federal write-in absentee ballot, or FWAB, in federal elections. It is a backup ballot that allows UOCAVA voters to vote in the event they do not receive their ballot in time to participate in the election. Select each button to learn more. UOCAVA requires states to designate a single office responsible for providing information regarding UOCAVA voter registration and absentee procedures. Additionally, each state's chief election official must, in coordination with local election officials, develop a free access system for UOCAVA voters to determine whether their election office received their ballot. UOCAVA provides enforcement power to the Attorney General, which means the Department of Justice may pursue legal action against jurisdictions that it believes are not following UOCAVA's requirements. The EAC provides resources, including tips to implement UOCAVA voting and data on state UOCAVA policies on the EAC website. FVAP is dedicated to making sure UOCAVA voters are aware of their right to vote and have the tools and information necessary to do so. Additionally, FVAP provides further resources and training for election administrators responsible for facilitating UOCAVA voting on the FVAP website. Now it is time to check your understanding. Read the question and answer choices and select your answer. Then select Submit. Congratulations! You have completed the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voting Act for election officials. You should now know who UOCAVA voters are, rules for UOCAVA registration and absentee applications, and required procedures for UOCAVA voting. As always, thank you for your work in elections.